Hi, this is Marjohn Love, and this is Marjohn's Musings. And today's show is 2020, oh my! We are filming our first episode in the brand new studio at 1623 Studios. And if you see cars and pedestrians out the window here, that's because our windows face out onto Pleasant Street. The studio is bright and airy and right downtown, so people can find us and become part of the 1623 community. It's kind of interesting. My husband and my friends Nancy and Victor and I went to the Cape Ann Museum, and there in the Cape Ann Museum, up on the wall, was a commemoration of 1623. I found it fascinating. If you get the chance to go to the Cape Ann Museum, which is right down the street here, you get to see the mariner's lifestyle. There's a display of miniatures up on the wall. There's this old song, the Hurdy-Gurdy Man, and I was fascinated to see a model of a hurdy-gurdy, and then right underneath that little miniature was an actual hurdy-gurdy on the floor under the table. It was kind of fun. There are portraits and seascapes. Some of them are absolutely gorgeous, and the museum brings in special shows. Well, today is the 18th of December, so we haven't quite had Christmas, but by the time I finish editing this show, it'll probably be the new year. So I wasn't quite sure what kind of theme to do for today. I was still dealing with the shop at Kohl's last-minute sales, and the stores are open 24 hours, and I thought, wow. I can remember when I was a little girl, my grandmother telling me that when she was a little girl, they hung their socks, not like fancy store-bought stockings, but they hung their socks on the mantle of the fireplace, and what they got in that sock was their Christmas gifts. And mostly it was fancy foods, oranges in the middle of winter, or cookies, homemade candies. I'm having a little rough time with that right now. I have the diabetes, and so normally I would bake dozens of cookies and give them out to my friends and neighbors. I'm not baking a bunch of cookies this year. We would have boxes of chocolate and candy canes on the tree, and although they're delicious, they're not worth having someone amputate my feet or going blind for. If you have diabetes like I do, try to tough it out, buck up. You can do this. You can make it through the holiday, and when someone offers you delicious homemade fudge that you know from prior years is like, oh my goodness, look at them and say, thank you, but no, I have diabetes. Most people, and I mean like 99.9% of people, when they hear that you have diabetes, stop offering you treats. They may forget every once in a while, and you have to remind them, but most people will respect the fact that you're trying to cope with a life-threatening health condition. We've talked before about how diabetes comes about. It comes about through long-term ingestion of sucrose and other sweeteners, dextrose, maltose. There's about 40 different types of sugars and sugar alcohols. So when you read the labels, read carefully, okay? Keep yourself safe this holiday season. The other thing is, by the time you see this, it'll either be the New Year or very close to New Year's Eve. Alcohol is a form of sugar. So if you're like me and you get 52 grams of sugar a day, and that includes every sugar there is, the sugar in your bread, from not just added sugar to make the yeast cause the bread to rise, but the sugar in the grain. It's a carbohydrate. Alcohol, like champagne, which I love, and beer, which I also enjoy, both have sugar. One has fructose from the fruit that champagne's made from, and the other is maltose from the grain that beer is made from. So be a little careful about ingesting alcohol, because you can get more inebriated than you used to, and you can mess up your blood sugar, which can make you lightheaded and dizzy. You could slip on the ice or hurt yourself. So be careful. Kevin and I are going to be doing Rockport New Year's Eve. We're going to do first night and bop around. I think, there's an entire schedule of things you can do when you buy your pass. And the passes are badges, and this year they had a student contest. Caden Pergington won the contest with his motif #1 painting, and I thought that was great. But it's gonna be at the Rockport Community House, the Methodist Church, the Unitarian Universalist Church, the Town Hall Annex, St. Mary's Episcopal Church, the Rockport Public Library, the Spearin Hall, the Baptist Church, the Scout Hall, and the Fish Shack, Rockport Art Association and Museum, Brackett's Restaurant, the Shaolin Lu Performance Center, the Congregational Church, and the Congregational Church Hall. And all of those venues are warm and heated, and it starts at 6 p.m. and it goes through till midnight. And there's an entire schedule that I'll post for you. One of the things that we did in preparation for the holiday season is we went to the Shaolin Lu to the Cape Ann Big Band Holiday Concert. It was a lot of fun, and they're going to be at the Shaolin Lu at 6 o'clock to kick off the evening. I think because I'm a writer, I'm going to go to the library to the poetry readings. And I've talked to you before about this folk singer, songwriter, Bob Franke. He's going to be at the library. And then I have friends who perform in Levin. And I think I want to go see Levin, the women's a cappella group. And like most things that have multiple tracks, it's hard because sometimes your two favorite things are happening at the same time in two different locations. I promised you last time that I would talk to you about French and why I'm studying French vocabulary. Well, I went to my vegetarian friends for Thanksgiving, and I pulled out my cards and I made them onion, l'oignon, I hope I'm saying that right, mushroom, which is le champignon, and green beans, which is le haricot vert. Okay, and I made them a healthier variation on the old French's crispy onions and cream of mushroom soup, Campbell's soup casserole. I did use a can of Campbell's soup, but I sliced up my own mushrooms and I sliced up my own onions, and because I'm a purist, I sauteed them in butter. And I added them to the fresh green beans and then made the sauce without quite so many of those crispy deep fried onions. I saved those for on the top. It was yummy, and they enjoyed it. One of the things that was kind of fun is that when we went to the Cape Ann Museum, afterward, as our Christmas present, our friends took us to Azorian restaurant, and at Azorian, I had eggplant. Now, this is not Portuguese, this is French. L'aubergine. I'm hoping that when Kevin and I get to the Bonhomme Festival up in Quebec, in Canada, that it'll probably be about like it is today, 15 degrees Fahrenheit. I got up this morning and I was so happy for the improvements in automobiles that have happened over my lifetime. I can remember as a child my grandpa cussing and fussing when it was like 20 degrees trying to get his old Buick to start. I went out this morning and it's 15 degrees. I'm coming to the studio and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is the car going to start? Turn the key. My little RAV4 went broom, started right up. I thought, wow, that's an improvement. I think fuel-injected engines and cold protective circuitry. One of the things that we had over Thanksgiving were a jar of preserved chestnuts, le marron, which I thought about that. You know, as an artist, I've used marron, for years. And sure enough, chestnuts are a red-brown color. Kind of fascinating. I was thinking about things that are in French. The French call them le bon ami and le mal ami, the good friends and the bad friends. And the good friends are cognates. Like a tart is le tarte. It's the same word, and we think a little pastry for a tart, and the French think a big pastry for a tart, but they're both pastry. Makes sense, and it sounds the same. But some words that sound the same are not the same at all. You can get yourself in real trouble. So I have a great courses video that I'm trying to go through and restore my first through third grade and then a year in college French vocabulary and the verbs. Oh my goodness, the conjugation of the verbs and articles. French being a Romance language, all words have a sex. They're either male or female, and you have to have the correct article, not just whether it's male or female, but whether it's singular or plural. I'm like, oh boy. I think I'll march out my sentence that I used when I went to Paris. Je suis une débutante français. Avez-vous patience avec moi? Which says, I am a beginner in French. Do you have patience with me? We'll see how we do. But one of the things I want to eat when we're up in Quebec is lobster. So I had to learn the French for it. Le homard. I thought, wow, that's different. And because I love butter on my bread, and now there's this fad that you dunk your bread in olive oil. We're at the Azorian, and they have this lovely spiced olive oil. I'm like, can I get a patty of butter? And the lovely young waitress says, sure. Well, butter is le beurre. I'll remember that one because I cook with it all the time. And we did a show, I think it's about a year and a half ago now, about me and my bread machine. You know, when it's below freezing, one of the best things in the world is to make a loaf of homemade, hot, fresh bread. And bread is le pain. I talked to you about my book about pies and how I was going to try to redo pies so I could eat them too with less sugar. An apple tart comes out pretty well without the sugar if you mix sweet apples in with the green ones. But la citrouille, which is pumpkin, I tried to make a pumpkin pie. Now the first one I made, I used a sugar substitute. It tasted delicious. My husband and I were tooting like Tubby the Tuba afterward. It gave us terrible gas. I was thinking, oh my goodness, maybe this isn't such a great thing. But c'est la vie, which means that's life. So we're going to go to Quebec and we'll be there for Valentine's Day. We're going to go visit the Ice Palace. Now, for those of you that are still in Christmas mode like I am, I got a Christmas card from the Cape Ann Symphony because Kevin and I sang 3 concerts with the Cape Ann Symphony. If you want, those concerts are filmed. They're on 1623 Studios, the Holiday Pops concert, and there's a couple of close-ups of me and Kevin. You get to go, oh wow, there's Marjohn and Kevin on TV singing for a change. I thought that was kind of fun. Speaking of Christmas cards, I have this problem with Christmas cards. I buy beautiful Christmas cards. This is a stag, and it says Merry Christmas, and I got 2 boxes, and Kevin's still working on the Christmas letter. It's the 18th of December. I think we've sent out about 4. When I get done here, I have to go home and write Christmas cards. But my Jewish girlfriend, Naomi, and her new husband, John, went up the north coast of Oregon, and they did like a selfie shot that was so good that they had it made into a greeting card. And it says, with love from John and Naomi 2019. It's kind of fun. That was the first Christmas card I got. Naomi's Jewish. I love it. So we're coming into 2020, and the Brackets hosted a event for the Rockport ambulance. Those people work really hard to help people. I have no idea how many people's lives they save every year. The Brackets are always doing wonderful things like that. So I have this Rockport ambulance calendar, and that got me thinking about calendars. And being female, I used to really be interested in the phases of the moon. You know, because as a woman, your body runs by the moon, not by the calendar. It's kind of interesting. We're trying a new format today. Instead of trying to do an hour show, which gets a bit tedious to sit through, we're going to do a 30-minute show. I'm sitting here and I'm still thinking and planning for like 55 minutes, and we've got 8 minutes left. I'm not sure where to go from here. Well, I'll tell you what's going on in my life. I decided that I was going to experiment with quilting. My grandmother used to quilt. I think when I was a little girl, I watched her quilt on an old-fashioned treadle sewing machine that she liked better than my mother's brand new Sears and Roebuck electric sewing machine. My grandmother's was a painted lady singer. And she said, you know, if the power goes out, which in those days, back in the early 50s, power went out pretty frequently, I can still sew with her treadle sewing machine. So I let that be known at the second glance. And one of the ladies there found me the Quilter's album of patchwork patterns. Whoever donated that to the Second Glance, thank you so much. In it are 4,050 different quilting patterns. I was like, that'll keep me going till I drop over dead. I got magazines there too of great American quilts. And one of the patterns that I'm looking forward to tackling is the Kentucky Crossroads. It's a little bit beyond me right now. What I'm working on is the beginner's patterns. They call them 9-patch patterns. And so I started making a Christmas quilt. And so here's my ivory and deer. Here's my dark value with black and very dark green. And here is a lighter ivory and green. And I realized when I went to put them together that even though they're the same theme, they don't always look great. So I'm going to go to Smith's Hardware and buy myself a sheet of 1-inch thick, 4-foot wide by 8-foot tall insulation and cover it with flannel so that I can lay out the blocks of my quilt patterns. Someone donated their cuttings, and they were in big plastic bags and they were very reasonably priced. And so I went ahead and bought their cuttings, little strips and squares and rectangles of all different colors of fabric. And some of the fabrics that I wound up purchasing were so tiny. I was like, oh my goodness, how do you sew 2 little triangles like this into a square without putting the sewing machine needle through your finger? I'm like, There's a pattern called Flying Geese that's beautiful. I'm hoping to try that. There's some star patterns. But right now, I think if I could master, it's called the perfect 1/4-inch seam. I'm not perfect yet. But one of the ones that I thought was really fun that maybe I'll make up for next year was cows. That was my very first sentence in life. A 2-word question to my Granny Mary. See cows? And Granny Mary patted me on the head and said, yes, darling, we will go out and see cows, because our recreation on Sunday mornings was to take that old Buick and drive out into the country. We lived in southern New Jersey, pasture land at the time. Very little pasture land left in New Jersey. And she would point out the cows. She had a whole mythology. The black and white ones gave white milk, and the brown ones gave chocolate milk. And this other interesting looking cow that I can't describe now because I have this 3-year-old, 2-year-old memory of these cows. She goes, oh, you'll like those. They give ice cream. My grandma was a hoot. Anyway, I was going to read you from Daily Word. I release limiting perspectives and allow my good to unfold. And I'm not going to read you the whole passage because, like I said, we're doing a shorter show. But what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is something that I found a bit disturbing. I went to Joann's Fabrics because although the lady that donated the squares donated a lot of beautiful Christmas fabrics in black and red and green, she must have used up most of her light colored fabrics. And you need lights and darks in quilting for your pattern to show up. I went to the Second Glance and I bought all this fabric. And then I went to Joann's and I paid retail, sticker shock, and that was at 50 and 60% off. But they had like racks, big, huge racks of bolts of Christmas fabrics. I looked through every bolt of fabric. Not one had a nativity scene of Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus. Not one bolt of fabric. And I thought, well, maybe they sold out already. So I asked the sales girl, and she said, no, I didn't see any this year. Back in the 80s, when my Andrew, who's in his 30s, was a baby and a little boy, people used to say, Jesus is the reason for this season. I don't know. Is that now a cliche? Something old-fashioned? The reason so many people loved Jesus for so many years, 2,000 years, was because he took the meaninglessness of life and death and said, you existed before you were born, and when you die, if you're good, you get to join my Father, the Creator God, in heaven. I'm glad I know that. It makes my life more meaningful. Get ready for this. That's all for now. This is Marjohn Love, and this has been the new, improved Marjohn's Musings.